Now when you first install Windows 10, it looks something like this. As you can see, I've got some desktop icons here, which may differ from what you've got, but essentially this is how the Windows 10 screen will look. So you've got the desktop here, you've got some controls over here, including things like the date and time. You've got some icons down here. This is what's called the status bar or the taskbar. You've got this new help facility over here, and over here you've got the start button. So for those of you who may have used maybe earlier versions of Windows, it's kind of similar but a little bit different. Now when you first switch on your machine, you'll probably have to supply a logon ID and maybe a password, and as I say, this is what the screen is going to look like once it's booted up. In order to run programs, quite often you'll have programs icons on here. These may have been set up by your IT people if you're working for a company. So in this case, if I wanted to start, say, Microsoft Word, I'd double click here, and this is Microsoft Excel. In other cases, I might have to go down to the Start button here. So this is the Start button. If I click on this, you get this sort of Start menu that pops up here, and you've got a pop-up here that's kind of similar to earlier versions, and then you've got this tiled version here for applications, which is a bit like the Windows 8 type interface, which was not really too popular. Now if you want to run one of these apps here, I mean this one here for instance, it's a weather app, you just simply click on it and up it comes. So they're fairly self-explanatory. So you can see here are the temperatures. As you can see, it's going to be a warm week here in Perth. I'll close that down, go back here, and all of these apps here, as I say, you can scroll down and see more apps. You basically just click on them and run them, so they're fairly straightforward. Now if you look at the menu items over here, in this case we've got an icon for, say, Microsoft Word. If I wanted to, I could just simply click on this, and in some cases you'll see this little arrow here, so you go to a jump list. If you click on that, that will give you what's called a jump list of sort of recently open files. I'll just click away from that and go back and click down here again. As you can see, you've got other icons here, like things like the Microsoft Internet Explorer program and the Getting Started program. If I click on Getting Started, the Getting Started program here basically displays the sort of things you might want to know about. So for instance, if you click on where it says What's New, you can see what's new in Windows 10. You can watch a little video there if you want to. And it tells you about new features, like the fact there's a new browser now. So instead of Microsoft Internet Explorer, you can use Microsoft Edge. You've got improved photos and even more facilities there, better multitasking, and so on and so forth. If you click down here, you'll see there's various other things. So you can look on how you can search for help, setting things up. So various things here, like setting up the computer for other members of your family, getting connected, a bit on Microsoft Edge here, and entertainment options here, Microsoft Office options here, and so on and so forth. So I'll click up here. This is the close button here. So I'll click there just to close that down, go back down here. And as I say, we accessed all of that by clicking on Getting Started. So I'll just click on there again, and as you can see, up comes the window. And to close the window, remember, click on this little button here. So I'll go back here, and let's see what else we've got. We've got the File Explorer. The File Explorer, if I just click on that for a second, that brings up information about items that you can connect to. So for instance, your hard disks or remote drives, or basic places where you can store data. So if I click where it says this PC, for instance, you can see I've got a number of hard disks and also USB sticks connected to the this particular PC. So I just close that down by clicking on there and click back on the Start button. We've got other things like settings here, so you click on settings. From there you can set your settings, you can customize your settings. So things like the time and language, you can set it for your particular region, your particular language. There's other things you can do. So for instance, you can set up accounts, you can personalize the background screen and colors and what have you. So all of these can be accessed through there, and to close it down again, you just click on that. So let's click back here, see what else we've got. We've got a power option. Now again, if you've used earlier versions of Windows, it's useful to know that if you click on where it says power here, that's where you've got your shutdown and restart command. So it's a little bit different from how it used to look if you're familiar with previous versions. If you click where it says all apps, that basically gives you this area here where you can scroll down and look at all the applications, i.e. all the programs that have been installed. So if you look at this, for instance, you can see that in this particular case we've got all sorts of applications here, like OneNote, something called PaintShop, photo apps and what have you. And if you come down here, you'll see that in some cases you've got this little down arrow next to the item here. So where it says Windows Accessories, if you click on the down arrow, that's like a folder containing these other items here. So if I wanted to, I could scroll down to say where it said Notepad, and that would open a little program called Notepad. If I go back here, go to All Apps, scroll down by just dragging this down. The way I just drag this up and down, by the way, is I move the mouse pointer to there, I hold the mouse button down, I keep it held down and just drag down. And if I click where it says Windows Accessories again, we just open Notepad. If I wanted to open the Paint program, I could click on that, and that's the Paint program open. So you can see we've now got two programs up and running. Incidentally, the way I'm moving this window around is I go to this area here, which is called the title bar. I press down the mouse button and keep it held down, and then I do what's called a drag and a drop, which basically means I keep the mouse button held down, and when I release it, like now, that means that's where the window is going to be dragged to. In a similar way, if I wanted to move this window up here, I would click here in the title bar, press the mouse button down, keep it held down, then drag, and then let go of the mouse button, and that's where it would stop. If we go down here again, and let's see what else we've got in the Windows applications. I go down here, Windows applications, and you can see there's various other things. There's a little program called Notepad, which is a very sort of cut down word processor type of program. So as you can see, we've now got three different programs running in three different windows, all displayed on the desktop. Now if we look at a window, this is the sort of traditional, original type Windows interface, and you generally had this item up here, this menu bar. So you click on File, and that will give you drop down menus, and then Edit, then Format, then View and Help. And you had these drop down items here that you could select things from. Up here you have the toolbar. The toolbar is useful for moving the window around, so if you click on the toolbar and drag and drop and then release, as you can see, that allows you to move the entire window. If you go to the edge of the window, in fact, just to make this easier, I'll click on these little things. These minimize windows. We'll see more on that in a minute. If we look at this particular window, let's say we want to make it narrower. You go to the edge here and you can see it change. I'll move the mouse pointer here. You see it change? If I press the mouse button down and drag, so it's called a drag and a drop, I keep the mouse button pressed down, and when I release the mouse button, like now, there you are, the window stays like that. If I want to make it wider again, I go to the edge here, press down with the mouse button, keep it pressed down, and when I release, that's where it's going to be. I could of course use either side, so if I wanted it narrower again, I could go to this side here, bring it in, so I'm keeping the mouse button pressed down, release it, and there we go. So I could go up to the toolbar, move it around. Let's say I wanted to adjust the height of this, I could go up to the top here and drag it down, or indeed the bottom here, drag it up or down. And if I wanted to, I could go to one of the corners here, and that allows me to drag in two directions at once. So this is how a traditional window sort of looks and feels. You've also got scroll bars here, so you've got horizontal and vertical scroll bars. So if you've got a load of data in here, you can scroll up and down and see the data. And you've also got some other controls here. This one here is the close button. This one here is the maximize button. And this one here is the minimize button. Now if I click on the minimize button first, what happens is it minimizes down here to this area at the bottom called the taskbar, the status bar. If I click on that, that brings it back up. So clicking on there will maximize it. So it maximizes it so it fills the whole screen. And now if we go over here, the button that was called maximize is now called restore down, because if I click on that, it restores down. Click on it now and it will maximize. So you toggle between maximize and restore down, like so. And as I said, this is the minimize button. It minimizes it down to the area down at the bottom of the screen here. If you want it back again, you just click on the little icon and back it comes. And this one here, I won't actually do it. This will close the window down, just this particular window. So that's what a traditional window looks like. If I just minimize that for a minute, and remember we've got these other ones here. So we've got the Microsoft program here. As you can see, this looks a little bit different at first glance, but essentially it's got the same. It's got the same controls here. Here you've still got these tabs here, so they kind of replace the idea of the drop-down menus. And instead of drop-down menus, you've got these groups containing icons down here. So if you click where it says Home, you've got the clipboard group, the font group, paragraph group, insert group, and editing group. If I click on the View tab, that gives me 3 groups: Zoom, Show and Hide, and Settings. And those in turn have these little icons and controls in there. So click on Home, I get icons and controls for things to do with things like cutting and pasting, more on that later. Things like text alignment and what have you. Bear in mind this is a little cut down word processor. You've also got some other things up here. So for instance, that's a quick save button. So you click on that and that will save the document. So if I typed in, for instance, my name. So I've typed in my name now. If I click on where it says save here, I could go and save that. So in this particular case, I would go to my documents, go to the Windows 10 Foundation folder by double clicking on it, and then where it says file name, I could just give it a name, something like my first file. And if I click on save, it was easy as that. So the title bar now says the file is called My First File, and the program used to produce it was WordPad, and that file has now been saved to my hard disk. So as you've seen, opening applications and saving your data is actually very straightforward. Now if we look over here, you will see there are some items that are useful. So for instance, you've got the little calendar down here and the time, so it tells you what the date is and what the time is. And what you've got here will vary slightly from one machine to another. So for instance, in this case we've got a little icon for speakers, and you go and click on that. That'll come up and allow you to set the volume. So I'll set it up to 100. So if you're playing music or listening to things on the headphones, this basically is like the master volume that you can set. If you click on this up arrow here, you can show hidden items or hidden icons. So for instance, that allows you to safely disconnect from a USB stick that I've plugged into the system. And over here there's various other things that you can access. So rather than having all of these being displayed along here, by default you just get a few of the more important ones, and you click there and you can access what are called the hidden icons, and from there you can access further things, like in this case a Bluetooth device, or what's called Skype, which is a sort of telephone type system. Then over here you've got an antivirus program and so on and so forth. And I'd say that will vary obviously depending from what you've got installed and what machine you've got. Now if you wanted to change the clock or the date for some reason, you could click on that and up comes this little calendar here, and you can see in more detail details about upcoming dates. And if you click where it says date and time settings, from here you can change things like the time and date. So in this case I've set this for Perth in Western Australia, and there's various other bits and bobs I could change. And I could also use these items down here. So where it says regional language, obviously I've set this for Australia, and I've set things like the keyboard and that to display dollars rather than say pound signs or yen or what happens to be. Now at the moment I've just got this one application displayed in the window, but I do have other applications that I opened. So if I go down here and click on these, up they come. So as you can see, I've now got a screen where I've got 4 different application windows up and running. So it's important to be able to move from one to another. The way I generally move from one window to another is I press down the Alt key and hold it down, then I press the Tab key once and release it, press it again and release it, press it again and release it, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And this basically shows you all the open windows. So let's say you wanted to switch to, say, the WordPad program. I would go like that. So I've been pressing the Tab key all the time. I've had the Alt key pressed down. If I release the Alt key, there you are, we switch straight to it. So let's say I wanted to go to the Notepad program. I press the Alt key down and hold it down, press the Tab key once and release it, press it again until I get to the Notepad program. If I now release the Alt key, I go to the Notepad program. And I generally find that's the best way of scrolling around from one program to another, especially if you've got lots and lots and lots of programs open, as in this case. So in this case, I'll go back to the WordPad program. There you go, and we're back to the WordPad program. There are other ways you can control the windows. So for instance, if I click down here, or rather I right click down here, there's various things you can do. So for instance, I can say, let's cascade the windows. So look what happened there. I went down to this area down here, I right clicked, normally you left click, so I right clicked, and I clicked on Cascade Windows. I could show windows side by clicking on this, and there you are, they're kind of tiled on the screen. If I wanted them cascaded again, I go down here, right click, say Cascade Windows, and off you go. If I go down here, you'll see there are other options. So for instance, where it says Show Desktop, that basically minimizes all your windows at the same time, which can be useful. Go back here, and you'll see that now, because there's no windows as such, the cascade and show windows stacked options are no longer available. So if I want to bring these back, I'd have to click on them one at a time like so, and up they come. Right click down here, and again these options are now available, so I could cascade the windows like so. I can still press the Alt key and hold it down, of course, and use the Tab key to allow me to manually select which one I want to go to, like maybe the Paint program, release the Alt key, and there we are. Now in this case I've still got all these programs open, so if I want to close them down, I just click on this little button here called the Close button, and it will close down. So if you click here, one by one they all close down. Notice that when they close down, they don't minimize down to the taskbar, because when you minimize down to the taskbar, you're not closing, you're minimizing. In this case, what I've done is I actually closed the program, so they're no longer in the main computer memory. They're still on your hard disk, of course, but they're no longer in the memory. So if you wanted to start them again, basically you'd have to go back to here, you'd have to go to All Apps, you'd have to go down to the bottom here, remember which folder they're in. So let's say you wanted, say, the WordPad program, you have to go here, click on this, and up it comes. So it's now open, and you can see it's open, it's down here. Close it, and it disappears from here, so it's now closed. Right, what I've done here is I've opened up a program called Microsoft Word, and as you can see, it looks a little bit more complicated, but it's basically the same thing. You've got the controls up here for closing, maximizing, minimizing, and what have you. Over here, you've got your tabs, so you've got your Home tab, Insert tab, and what have you. So if we go back to Home tab here, within the Home tab, you've got the various groups. So you've got the clipboard group, the font group, the paragraph group, the styles group, and the editing group. And if you look, say, in the paragraph group here, within that you've got things like alignment buttons and icons and what have you. Over here in fonts, you can select different fonts, click on the drop down here and select the fonts you want. Click on these items here for larger or smaller text size and what have you. So it's all kind of fairly straightforward and fairly standard. Again, you've got a quick save icon over here, and generally with most of these programs you have an undo and a redo facility, which is quite useful. So if you do something and mess up, then remember quite often there's an undo facility up here. Also, with a lot of Microsoft programs, if you click where it says File, that gives you sort of filey type options, so things like opening files, closing files, saving files, printing, that kind of stuff. And to come out of this, you just click on that like so. And sometimes you might have some extra controls down here. So for instance here you can see that this version of Microsoft Word is set for English Australian because I'm in Australia. And then over here you've got some extra controls like a zoom control, for instance, so you can zoom the page in and out. If you add text on that, you can see it, you can see the effect more clearly. And in this case you've got some various modes, so you've got like read mode and print mode. Print mode just shows you in this case what it's going to look like when it prints, and read mode gives you kind of an uncluttered view. But obviously those controls will change from one application to another, and maybe from one manufacturer of a Windows program to another. But broadly speaking, when you know how to use one of these programs, you kind of know how to use them all. And that really is the whole point of Windows. It's a bit of a learning curve at first. If you've never used Windows before, maybe you're used to an earlier version of Windows, but after a very short period of time, you just sort of know what you're doing. It's sort of intuitive, and you can kind of, even if you're not sure exactly what you're doing, you can kind of guess, and 9 out of times you get it right. And as we'll say, there's also pretty good help available now.